I did have a feeling, like it was kind of like that manifesting, like, changing your mentality. I was definitely over Hong Kong. He's like, you can do Mexican food. I'm like, dude, I can't just do any food. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, I was wrong. You're right. Hi, my name is Lenny, and this is One Night in Bangkok.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to the One Night in Bangkok podcast. If you guys are new here, my name is Eric. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and 5 years ago, I ended up here in Bangkok, Thailand. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. We are bringing on so many cool people from this city, and I don't want you to miss anything. And if you guys are visiting Bangkok soon, if you want to know where to go out, we've created a private Facebook group. I'll put the link down below. And also the Instagram is live. So if you want to check out what's happening in Bangkok, you can check that out down below. Tonight, I've got one of the guys behind one of my new favorite restaurants in Bangkok. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Lenny. I am running a restaurant in Bangkok called Molino, which is located on Soi 11. We are aiming to be a little bit of a party vibe and have some great Mexican food.
Yeah, it's Mexican, which there aren't too many Mexican restaurants in Bangkok, right?
It's not very popular outside of the States.
Right. But I think it would appeal to Thai people even if they were more familiar with it.
There's a lot of similar nuances in the cuisine in terms of flavor and what flavors they like to touch on.
Okay, cool. So why don't we start with that? I came in on one of the first nights and it was great because I think in Bangkok, there's not too many Mexican places, and there's some places that are, obviously there's like Taco Bell, but let's not talk about that. But there's some places that I feel like don't quite hit the spot.
Right.
And I thought that it did a really good job of being, not like super fine dining, but great food, great vibe, and a great location because it's on Soi 11.
Yeah, so what I want to create is a good atmosphere, and I want something that's approachable for any level of clientele, whether it's like, somebody who doesn't have money and somebody who does. But I also want it to be a little bit sexier than your average Mexican restaurant throughout the world, because Mexican food, especially in the States, has a bit of a stigma that it's cheap shit food, to say the least. But what I'm trying to do is, because ingredients in Mexican cuisine are so expensive in Thailand, is give a reason why people can pay a little bit more for something that's authentic or something like that.
That's a really good point. It's hard. We almost take it for granted back in the States because the ingredients here, you might not be able to get some of the same ingredients, or they might be very expensive to import.
It's actually
Is that right?
illegal to import certain things into Thailand due to like agricultural laws.
Really?
So the corns that you would find very easily and accessible in the States that are coming from Mexico, the chilies, there are a lot of laws inhibiting how we can import them.
Really? Why did you want to do Mexican?
That was more of a demographic, kind of like what's going on in Soi 11, and kind of look at what are our options if we did, because first, before the Mexican came up, we had the space come up. And I had actually discussed doing Mexican food near Soi 11. So with them coming together, we kind of were like, okay, let's do Mexican in Soi 11 so that we can kind of create something that's similar to what's going on with Havana and what's going on with, with Tony's in terms of like the level of cuisine and stuff like that, and the approachability and price point. But staying true to the fact that, we want to do something Mexican, but having something a little bit nicer that Soi 11 doesn't really have yet.
Yeah. And that's for sure. It's unlike anything else on the street, which I think will definitely work in your benefit.
Yeah. I wanted something that was very different. And it's tough to stay different because, when you open a restaurant, you have to kind of stick to your guns. You have to think about, okay, the first and most important thing is like, what are we? We are a Mexican restaurant, but if we are just a Mexican restaurant in Soi 11, we're not going to survive. So we need to think about how do we kind of take that Mexican feeling and bring it into the nightlife culture of Soi 11 so that we can like kind of piggyback on the fact that like Soi 11 is a party street and create a vibe that people actually want to stick around for and like enjoy into the late hours of the night.
What you just described is exactly what I was thinking when I went in there for the first time. I thought it fit so well into the street in terms of the atmosphere. And, I'm not a restaurant guru or anything, but when I think about why do I want to go to a certain restaurant, for example, I love Oscar, which is also on Soy 11.
Right.
I think 50% of it is just the vibe there. Just, I feel comfortable. I just like hanging out there.
Okay.
And, it was kind of the same thing at Molino. Like when I went, one of the things I noticed was the DJ you had. The music was so good.
Right.
It was kind of like, how would you describe it? Like Latin house music?
It's Latin house mixed with pop house, mixed with a little bit of tech house.
Yeah.
It's definitely trying to stay true to, I would say there's a lot of European feels to it. Like where it's like 1990s, early 2000s where they're, like with Dennis, the person who you're referring to, he's like a new DJ who is a music producer, but his main thing is like DJing now and his TikTok and Instagram, being an influencer and stuff like that. And he's like kind of doing this to see if he can do it. And we go through every day like the kind of songs that he's going to play, and it's really nice to have this like kind of intimate relationship with Dennis to like kind of talk to him about like, I didn't like that song, or I do like that song, because a lot of DJs get very pretentious and they're like, oh, you don't like it? Like, well, fuck you. And it's like, well, no, it's like, it's my restaurant. Like, it's not the song that I want creating the vibe for this place.
Yeah, because it's all these details that kind of work together. Like even you have like the mural on the wall, the, what do you call it? Sugar skull or the
Calaveras. Is like what they're actually called.
Okay. Yeah. The Day of the Dead style artwork. Yeah. So it's really cool. Definitely. You got the neon sign out front. You told me before, but what does the name mean?
So Molino, the actual name, it directly translates to the mill. And the thing is, in Mexico, the mill refers to the corn mill in which they stone grind corn tortillas. So one of the things, like I said, the first thing is like we are a Mexican restaurant, is the corn tortilla and like creating our own masa for our empanadas and creating our own masa for our corn tortillas. So Molino is the machine of which we use to make that masa. And so that's kind of like where the whole idea of Molino came in.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have that on the menu or anything? Because that's a cool little tidbit to
at
put
the
in
moment I don't,
for people that come in.
I had a meeting with my staff today about like kind of creating a cover page for the menu.
Yeah.
That kind of says what we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, I think people like to know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm working on getting all those like kind of details ironed out as we progress through the next couple of months.
I want to get more into the restaurant, but before we do that, let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from originally?
So originally I'm from Long Island, New York.
Okay, so we got another American. I don't meet too many Americans here. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I don't meet many people from Boston.
Really? I don't think I've ever met a guy from Boston.
You?
I don't think I ever have here.
Yeah, no. I met one person like maybe like last week, and I looked at him and I said, "Oh, you're from Boston? Fuck off."
And it's weird because when we were in the restaurant, as soon as you started talking, not only did I know you were from the U.S., but I could tell you're from the Northeast.
Okay.
From your accent.
Because I definitely don't have the strong New York accent
You
anymore.
don't, but it's... I
spent 4 years in New England, so I kind of like, got held up at knife point, and I was wearing a Yankee hat, and I basically said, I'm gonna lose my accent.
Wait, where was that?
In Providence.
Oh, yeah. We when I met you, we talked about this. So you went to Johnson and Wales,
correct?
Right,
yeah.
Which is a culinary school.
Yeah, about 40 minutes south of Boston.
Right, and I'm actually from Rhode Island.
Okay,
right near Providence.
Oh, yeah. You're from Warwick, no?
Cranston, yeah. And then I went to Boston.
Right.
Yeah, so that's crazy how
Yeah, so I like spent a good 4 years out in East Providence, and I learned very quickly being from New York and being in New England wasn't very beneficial to me.
Why?
Because there's this rivalry.
Oh, okay. Because of the sports thing.
The sports thing, and like just in general, like, like especially when you're, 18 to 22 years old and you're just like in college and learning how to drink, and, sports are everything. And, New York is winning like. I think it's like Tom Brady era, like where Tom Brady was winning like every year,
Well,
but then also like Yankees were winning every year.
I thought you were going to say because, I feel like New York people are always New York people. And everything outside of that is like substandard. Like it's not the biggest, it's not the best. If you want the best of everything. Mentality. Yeah.
I definitely have that like New York mentality in that sense. But I always found that Boston people were always just like mean.
Happy New Year.
Fuck the New Year and fuck you too.
Like New Yorkers are mean, but like we're like more like go mean. But like Boston, I always found like, especially with my time in Boston, like I spent a couple days there and nights, throughout the years that I lived there. I found that Boston people, I never felt comfortable. Like after, maybe it's because of what happened to me like very early on in the time that I was in Boston. But I mean, being held at knife point like within the first 2-3 weeks and hearing gunshots, and I was like, oh God, I'm from New York, and I thought we were hard, but no, like.
Yeah, it's weird when you live here for a while, and then you go back there, like all that stuff really jumps out. Because when you're living in it, you get used to it.
Yeah, it's normal.
But then once you get out of that environment and then you go back, it's actually kind of shocking.
It sucks. It's like, going back to the States now is crazy.
Yeah. So what brought you out of the U.S.? How did you make that jump?
2012, I got an opportunity to work on an agriturismo in Italy, and that's where I met Tony.
What is that?
An agriturismo is a farm mixed with a hotel, doing agricultural things to try to be self-sustaining to like the natural environment, so like drinking the water that comes from the rivers, and having cows and growing them and eating their meat and drinking the milk, and having chickens and eating the eggs and then eating the chickens, and like growing them and trying to be 100% self-sustaining.
Okay. And when you say Tony, you're talking about Tony of Tony's on Soi 11.
Correct.
And also the new place at Scene Space.
Yeah.
Doko.
So me and Tony are partners for Doko and Lucky, and there is another kind of brainchild that's in the background right now called South Street. But our main focus right now is Doko.
Right. Doko, Lucky, and South Street, they're all in Scene Space, Tung Law. Yeah. Right. Cool. Okay. So Doko, how would you describe that?
Pizza and donuts.
Okay, it's better than pizza and donuts, because I'm not kidding you. It's my favorite pizza right now in Bangkok.
Fuck yeah.
Because I love pizza with like a thicker crust, like more substantial than like a
very misunderstood.
Yeah, not like a thin New York slice or something like that. I don't like that. So you met Tony in Italy.
Yeah,
and
Italy.
Tony is from New York, right?
Tony is from New Jersey. So he's from like a small town.
I love how you had to jump in and make that distinction.
Yeah, he's not from New York.
Because he might live like half a kilometer from New York City, but if you're not from within New York City, you're not allowed to say it.
You're not from New York.
Yeah.
You're not possible.
Yeah, I was so happy when I went there for the first time, Tony's on Soi 11, because I'm Italian American. And obviously I grew up a lot with Italian food. And when I came here, I found it really hard to find places that I enjoyed. And I think one of the problems, and I never thought about this until I came here, like in America, we have people that have immigrated from all over the world. Okay, so my father's family's from Italy, and I don't know where your family's from, but Italy, yeah. And a lot of times in the U.S., if there's an Italian restaurant, there's probably a good amount of Italians working there. Chinese, Mexican,
yeah.
At least partially. But in Thailand, it's usually not like that at all. It's an Italian restaurant full of Thai people,
with maybe one visa sponsoring one Italian person to be there.
Right. And that makes it hard, I think, for food, because these people obviously haven't grown up with the food like maybe you or I have. So what kind of challenges is that? What kind of challenges does that create in terms of being able to train a staff to be knowledgeable and to understand what your patrons are looking for?
It's such a tough thing to answer. It's like, okay, so we have an idea in our head and we want to portray it, right? And this is like kind of funny. I'm going to say this how I do things with Thai people or in Chinese in Hong Kong, like Chinese people. And I put the idea down and I show them like a version of it, right? Let's say it's a pizza, and I'm like, okay, this is a pizza, right? Okay, you understand this is pizza. You understand this. This is like the first part of it, and then getting them to, and getting yourself out of the mentality that they're going to be able to do it like you is very, very crucial to like the next couple steps, where it's like, okay, here's the pizza. This looks beautiful. You agree? Okay, next. The next stage is like getting them to do it and make a pizza, and that pizza is going to look terrible 99% of the time, and getting them to understand that, you know, don't let them be discouraged that like it's not right, but like figuring out how to get them to what you want to do. You know, that's the real challenge in that whole thing, is like getting like, okay, here is what we want and this is what it is. And sometimes it comes down to like bringing them to another pizza place, or bringing like Domino's or something really menial, and getting them to understand that, and then getting them to the next stage where it's like, okay, this is why you have to ferment the dough this way. This is why you have to do this. And like getting them into that kind of mentality to make it exactly where you want to get it to. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like,
so it's a
like,
process.
Like you dumb it down for yourself and them first, and like then they understand it, and then you kind of bring it to the stages as you get to that next thing. Now, after being here for like 9-10 years, you kind of figure out where those steps are. And there are some very talented cooks that, you know, can figure it out very quickly. And some even that have only worked with Western cuisine, because it tends to be that if they get out of the Thai culture and the Thai cuisine, aside from like, you know, these fine dining Thai restaurants, there's a lot more money for a Thai person making Western food to be made, if they're doing Western food very well.
I see. Really? So a Thai person looking to be in culinary, you're saying they can make way more money if they focus on Western food?
Yeah, I think.
Is that because of a supply and demand issue, or
a bit of that? But it's also like, I feel like Western food is always inherently more expensive in Asian countries.
Yeah.
So that creates a bigger profit margin.
Yeah, it's easier than to pay more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it becomes more of a specialized skill.
Right.
Whereas like, you know, you go to a Thai restaurant and they're, you know, if you make Thai food and it costs 50 baht for like a kapow or whatever it is, like there's not much money to be made in that restaurant. You know what I mean? The profit margins are a lot smaller, and they tend to be more family driven businesses. And, you know, but as you go into like the next levels of cuisine, where it's like Western food automatically ends up becoming like, even if it's Mexican food and it's tacos, it's like a step up. You know what I mean? It's a step up of skill. It's a step up of like ingredients and quality. You know what I mean? Because it's not just like picking up the local market stuff. You know, we go out and we find like the best ingredients, find the best suppliers, find the best plates and napkins and things like that to make the experience in the restaurant feel a bit more Western. You know, because in you know, in those Italian restaurants that you used to frequent as you're growing up, right? They didn't just give you like shitty service or anything like that. They didn't come out wearing T-shirts or something like that, right? They always had a white button-up shirt. They always had an apron on. It was like Italian, right?
Well, it depends which ones. I mean, you've got the ones, especially like in Rhode Island. There's so many Italians. I mean, you've got everything from you know, small little mom and pop restaurant.
But I would consider like the pizzerias, but like an Italian restaurant.
Sure.
You know, I mean, maybe it's just me being from New York. It's like when you went to an Italian restaurant, whether it was like the local one or like the really nice one in my town, it was always a step up in terms of service compared to like going to the pizzeria. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah. There's
like,
definitely a distinction there.
There's like a different type of like kind of feeling when you walk into these type of restaurants, and like that kind of like, I think that like that part of the restaurant culture in America or in Europe in general, right, is what the Asian culture like has brought Western people in to like kind of bring in, like, and kind of like embed inside like the food and beverage industry. So like if you think about it in terms of like you know, I think back to like Hong Kong, they brought in a lot of Western chefs maybe 20, 30 years ago to make the food scene more hygienic and just like overall better. Because if you go to a local Hong Kong restaurant now, it's much more clean than a local Thai restaurant now. So when you look at a local Thai restaurant, right, this would never, like, when you really look at it and you're like okay, you're at like let's not name names, but it's like you go to like the local street vendor or the local Thai restaurant that like serves, you know, food that's like less than 100 baht a dish. There's not refrigeration. There's not, you know, like, you know, climate control in any way. It's usually outside. It's usually like beer comes hot when you put ice in it. Like, these are like very old methods, and like, you know, they use old preservation techniques to like keep you from getting sick. But like, if you do eat at these restaurants quite frequently, you will get sick. Like, it's very common. But if you look at Hong Kong and the local restaurants, what it was 30, 40 years ago versus what it is now, even those local restaurants now have refrigeration. Now they're always holding temperature. And I really believe that's because like the French maybe like 100 years ago really redefined food and then brought all that kind of culture into like Western mentality. And then brought that mentality into Asia. And then you've now seen it like in the designs of restaurants and the type of food that they serve and the ingredients that they serve. It's like, why are they bringing in all these like beef? And like, I mean, Thailand, you see it with the ingredients a lot, where it's like, now you have this Thai French beef, or you have a company like Sloan's doing local bacon with using Thai pork, you know, but they're using the techniques like that the Western people and the Western culture have kind of refined, and then they've now brought it back. And I feel like in the last, 30 years in Hong Kong, that's what you've seen. And then now you'll see it like within the next, I mean, even in Soi 11 now, right? Like in the last 6 months, they've taken away street carts, right? They've taken away local vendors.
Yeah, it's almost unrecognizable from a year or two ago.
And I think that's like, it's really cleaning up. Like it definitely loses that charm of like.
By charm, you mean that grimy Bangkok feel.
Yeah, that real gritty Bangkok feeling. But this is like the gentrification of what is Bangkok, right? Like you're like looking at Bangkok now is like what Williamsburg was 20, 30 years ago, and now what it was and what it is now is like completely different,
Yeah.
And you're going to see that happen. I mean, you've already seen it in Ekamai. You've already seen it in Tanglor, right? Because there's a lot more money here. And that's kind of trickling down towards Asok, towards, Nana. But they don't want to lose that tourist feeling where you have Nana Plaza, you have Soi Cowboy, and they're all kind of like creating this mayhem vibe, right? But that's where I think, like, even tying it back to like what Molino is like, it's kind of that, like, I need to find that that balance between like what is that true Bangkok grit and like what is like that next level of what is coming, and kind of grow into it.
I totally understand what you're saying, because I've been here 5 years. I've definitely noticed some questionable hygiene practices in some of these places. For me though, I actually have had pretty good luck with the street food places. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's because they cook it right there at high temperature or what, but I don't know that I've ever been sick from a street food place, but I've definitely gotten sick from restaurants.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't mean like, I mean like an average Thai or Asian restaurant, like not anything special. But oh yeah, for sure. In fact, there's some place, I'm not going to name it. There's some place I got sick, but I really liked the restaurant. I'm like, I'm going to go back. I got sick the next time too. Like, I'm done. Yeah. It's definitely a cultural difference. And for someone like, us, like we grow up, maybe like my grandparents used to yell at me, like, you got to wash your hands, you got to do this and that. From what I've seen, that doesn't exist here. And it's almost like
it's something that I'm always like with my staff, like, clean your hands, do this, wash this, they sneeze, like, wash your hands. Like, what? Like, wash your hands. Like, you just sneeze. Nobody wants your nasty COVID germs.
Yeah. And that adds like a whole other layer of complexity to managing a restaurant, because a restaurant is already, I think, mayhem.
Yeah.
But when you also have the cultural differences, it's going to be so hard. So how did you go from, you went from the US to Italy, and then where next?
I was the U.S. from Italy, and then I went back to the States. I lived in Manhattan for a year, and from there I got the opportunity where Tony from Tony's in Soy 11, like he asked me to come be his chef de cuisine or sous chef for a John George restaurant in Hong Kong, and then from there I moved to Hong Kong.
And when it comes to moving across the world, like, was it a big deal, or were you just like, let's go?
I was shitting my pants. I was like, what am I going to do? I was like, I was with the Chinese book, like learning Chinese, like, oh, I'm going to fucking die. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
It's funny. You were like, oh, I'm moving to Hong Kong. So I'm going to learn Chinese, but you're learning Mandarin. But in Hong Kong, they speak Cantonese, right?
Yeah. No, I was learning Cantonese. I was like, literally, I was going to say lo mein, but like, Leho, I was like learning like the kind of like the basics to Cantonese. And then I arrived and everything was in English. Everybody spoke English. Everybody who was cultured spoke fluent English.
Really?
Like, so people who went to international schools, their first language was English. And the people, that you tended to want to associate with all had basic understanding of English. And very quickly, there was no reason to practice Cantonese.
Do you think it's the same here or no?
Very similar.
Really?
I think that, yeah, because like I took lessons for 2 months in Thai, and then at that point I was like opening a restaurant also. Like the restaurant I was opening was like in the process of opening. Like we were in like maybe like I started basically like a month before they opened, taking the lessons, and then a month into the opening, and then I just realized I wasn't practicing and I wasn't using it. And if I'm not integrating the lessons into my daily life, there's no reason to even continue taking the lessons, because I'm not speaking it and I'm not actually gaining anything from taking the lesson. Because I can just be like, what is a table to my staff? And they'd be like, toe,
So how long were you in Hong Kong? And then when did you come here?
I spent 7 years in Hong Kong, like like 7 years more or less. After Hong Kong, I basically quit my job. I had a really stable job in Hong Kong. I was working at a place called the American Club, country club, catered to like the 1%. It was great. We got to work with the best ingredients. Had a good relationship with my chef. He's visited me here 3 or 4 times. We've had great times together. And I had asked him at the end, I said, I hadn't been home in 2 years because of COVID. My brother had gotten married and had a baby. My sister had her second baby, and my mom had cancer. I was like, I need to go home and be with my family. And they said, you can go home in 8 months. And I was like, well, what if my mom's not around in 8 months? And they said, yeah, we can't do better than in like 8 months. And I said, okay. And I resigned. I went back. I spent some time with my family. When I was with them, I decided to stop in Bangkok before going back to Hong Kong, because I didn't move out of Hong Kong at that time. And on the stop to Bangkok, on the second night, I had met the people at the deck, and they were like, it was a very like whimsical conversation where they were just like, okay, do you want to move here? And I'm like, yeah. It was like, we need a chef. And I was like, I need a job. And we started talking, and I met a couple different people at the same time, but I actually just really liked them. Like I like Vic and Damien from the deck, and Mike, the guy who does the tequila, helps me with the tequila at Molino now. I just really liked them, and like the other company I was asking me to help them out, offered me a lot more money, but I just liked being around them more, and I liked spending time with them. They seemed a lot cooler and like more influential in the actual industry, and just more of it just felt more Bangkok to me. I don't know how to describe it. Like, a little bit more real, let's say. So I work with them. I mean, on the second day here, I got a job. We started talking, and I had a month to kind of decide. But after like a week, we had already like come to an agreement, and I had started like the process of helping them open their restaurant.
Wow! And how long ago was that?
That was 2 years ago.
Okay, only 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Cool. But Tony was already here?
Yeah, so I came to visit Tony.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say
I
you knew
literally,
he was here.
I literally just came to go see Tony's restaurant because like he opened a restaurant and we had been working together for almost 10 years, and I was like, fuck, he finally opened his own restaurant. And I was so proud of him, and I wanted to come say what's up and go support his restaurant.
Yeah, your story. I mean, it's different, but I find that most people I meet here, they never plan to move to Bangkok. It's always
I had no intention to
something
move here.
happens.
I did have a feeling, like it was kind of like that manifesting, like, changing your mentality. I was definitely over Hong Kong. I had gone through a lot of shit in like the last like 2 years because of COVID, and like I had a surgery in Hong Kong. I had a very bad breakup, and it was just time for me to leave the city because now, even for me with Hong Kong, it's like it doesn't have the same charm that it had 5 years ago, or like now. I'm sorry, like 10 years ago when I actually moved there, and I just felt that it was time. Like, and even visiting after I had moved here and I lived here for a year, and they finally lifted the quarantine to like actually having no like quarantine, and you could just go in and like freely. It just felt like the soul was ripped out of Hong Kong.
Right. And over that time, there was probably more and more of the Chinese influence, right?
Yeah, so the whole Chinese, like really big Chinese movement kind of started in 2019, where they had the protests, and then after the protests, like it really created this really bad stigma for Hong Kong because like they were so exposed. There was protests in America, there was protests in Brazil, there was protests in Thailand, right? But the protest in Hong Kong was the one that everybody focused on in 2019, even though there was happening everywhere, especially like, I think 2020 was the George Floyd, and then like in 2020 also like Thailand, like it really got fucked up during COVID. Like I wasn't here, and I wasn't really following it too much, but like with Hong Kong, my dad, my mom would like message me every day, be like, "Are you okay? Did you do that? Were you a part of this part? And were you doing this?" And like, I don't know if it's just because of that, but even, and it wasn't just them, it was like any one of my friends who was like kind of following what was happening, they would all message and be like, "Are you okay? Like, are you part of this, or what is going on?" And like, but I think it's because the free speech of Hong Kong like really exposed what was happening to the world, and people don't want, really don't want China to like kind of take over more, because they know that like once that starts to happen, it's kind of like inevitable. It's like, China is one of the most powerful places right now in the world, especially it's in the forefront of technology. But after that protest in 2019, like they stopped doing it publicly, and then they started doing it like discreetly. So they had passed the national security law, which had which was what started the whole protest. They had passed a national security law like sometime in like the end of 2020 or 2021, and they just did it and didn't tell anybody. And then like I remember the next day in Hong Kong, like it was like, you stole a kid's candy. It was like everybody was just like with a grumpy face, and everybody was just like didn't know what to do. People didn't show up to work. They didn't like. It was just the most solemn day that you can ever imagine. And from there, like it never came back. And like Hong Kong locals, like who were like pro Hong Kong and crazy like that, like just were like, fuck it, like I'm leaving, And like I remember in that time, like we had a lot of like staff because like it's before I left, we had a lot of staff resign, and within like 1 or 2 months, like moved to London, moved to the States, moved to Canada, like because they just like were afraid of it. Even though like even now it doesn't feel like much has changed, but like you can feel like the mentality of like the people has just completely been like diminished, and they just like don't have that same kind of feeling of like, I don't know, like I'm from Hong Kong anymore.
Yeah, it's lost its identity a little.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny though how you were saying the place you were working at, they didn't want to let you go back home? If they had let you go back home, if they said like, "Oh yeah, no problem," do you think you would have stayed there?
I mean, I didn't just ask them for going home. I asked them for a lot more money. I asked them for like the market rate from like my position because I had like taken the position during COVID. I don't know how long I would have stayed. I would have definitely like played it out a little bit longer, you know, because it was I mean, it was double what I make here. And like, even as an owner, like, I mean, yeah, there's like an ownership, like there's definitely more potential later, but like, the salary that I take, it was at least double, you know, and it was like a very comfortable position where it was a very corporate job. Like I could have like definitely easily, stayed there for a very long time and been very content. Yeah, there would have been a moment where I wanted to do more.
You think so, even with the shifting cultural stuff happening? Because like you said, Hong Kong now is very different than it was 7 years ago.
I had a much healthier lifestyle in Hong Kong. I didn't drink nearly as much. I didn't party nearly as much. I was running and exercising every day. I probably gained 10 pounds just moving here, 10 kilos just moving here. So there is like, you know, like I said, there's this trade-off of like stability, and that stability creates comfort. That comfort creates, you know, for me and my personality, right? Like it creates this like ability to like schedule my days and be like, okay, I'm going to work out today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, you know, you don't like with my restaurant now, I'm literally there or thinking about the restaurant at every single moment of the day. And even now, like you saw, like I checked my phone to watch the camera to see who's there, see if the people are arriving tonight for whatever vibe we're going to get at night. And then from there, kind of like also it like ruins my sleep. And I really think that it'll change over time because I've done this before. But like, you know, I really worry about it. Like it's my own child. And like, I think about it at all times. And I'm thinking about, you know, how to market, how to cook this better, how to make a better cocktail, or what the price point is, or like every little detail that you can even imagine that goes into the restaurant. You know, I'm thinking about it at all times. And in the sense of like what your question actually was like, I had a really comfortable life and it was probably the healthiest I've ever been, you know, but would I have been ultimately happy? I don't know, but
Yeah.
I was healthier and mentally more happy.
It is strange though how like one or two small things can just change the whole course of your life. Like if they gave you more money, if they're like, oh yeah, go visit your family, maybe your life is totally different now. Like for me, before I came here, I was waiting on living in this certain apartment building and something got messed up and it didn't work out. And I got so frustrated, I just said, forget it. I'm leaving. Goodbye. And then here we are.
It was the same shit. It was like,
Yeah.
you know, fuck you, I'm not coming back.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, basically. So how did the opportunity come up for Molino? Because you said you were working at the deck, is that right?
Okay, this one is like, okay, how do you explain this? So me and Tony kind of like talked about doing a Mexican restaurant because the deck had a Taco Tuesday and it was quite successful. And like, he's like, you can do Mexican food. I'm like, dude, I can't just do any food. Like even when he opened the Lucky, right? He's like, you can help me with the menu. You can do that. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, but like you're better off hiring a Chinese person to do it. Like it's like they're, you know, I guess if like we're making, you know, Italian American food, like that, it's their bread and butter. So what happened with Molino was I had left the deck in December of 2021, right? No, 2022, right? What year?
I don't know what year it was. Right now it's
I don't know what year
24.
it is.
So
it was 2022 at the end of the year, and
Okay.
And I had
that was like about a year ago, a little over a year ago.
I had realized in about 6 months prior I needed to get a surgery in my back, so I went back to the States to do it. During the time that I was back there, me and had already started to talk about this kind of like concept of doing something Mexican. Then the space came up because we wanted to make sure that it was like the right location. He was like looking at a lot of different places, and you know, my biggest thing with doing something that's Mexican is like it needs to be small, because I don't really believe that it has the same type of international traction as like Italian cuisine or Chinese cuisine or Thai, you know, like things like that. Like if you open a Thai restaurant in the town that I'm from in Long Island, New York, like if it's 200 seats, it's gonna fail. You're not gonna get a Thai restaurant to like kind of get that traction, right? And then it's vice versa. It's like if you open a Mexican restaurant across the world, I think it'll fail if it's 200
Yeah,
seats.
that's a great analogy.
But if you bring it back to like something that's a little bit like, Molino really only has 10 tables for like dining in, that becomes very possible. Like, can I get 10 tables to sit down every day and I can have a successful restaurant? Becomes a lot more achievable than 250 people inside the restaurant every day. So he had found a couple of spaces that were like bigger, and I was like, Italian, like that's what we got to do for that type of place, or Thai, like I think like I'd rather see like an elevated Thai cuisine in a bigger space. But basically, like if we found this space that's small and it was intimate, we looked at it, it was like kind of terrible. The original design of what Concord was, I'm going to refer to it as Concord because that was like the design that actually we took over. Concord was really cool, but it was very dark and it was very uninviting, and the concept didn't work.
Was it a restaurant or a bar? Or what was
a speakeasy. So when you entered the restaurant, like we'll call it a restaurant for whatever. When you entered Concord, the first thing you would see, it was like what is it called? Coffee shop. It was a little like coffee shop, but it was like not a coffee shop. It was like kind of like a mini coffee shop where it was just like a coffee machine, 4 or 5 seats, bar counter, and that's it. And then there was a big black door that took you into the back, which was a very sexy speakeasy, which was like all black paint, all black and gray, with just like, accent lighting and stuff like that. Concord was owned by the same people as Tapioca and Rimshot now and Sugar Ray Apartment, right? And the concept what they had was really, really good, and the design was really cool. Like, I even still have their original bathroom. I think that there was no reason to change the bathroom. It was like very nicely done, very well constructed, and I think that like there were some details of the place that were actually done really, really well.
Why do you think theirs didn't work?
So Concord didn't work. Like, I think it would have worked because they're so good at what they do, but I think because of COVID, they couldn't justify putting more money into it because they opened up 2019 like middle of the year, towards the end of the year. And then by like the 3rd or 4th month, COVID was in full effect and everything shut down, right? So I think that they just couldn't justify putting more money into a business that they didn't know was going to work, and they had to just cut the ties.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Not great timing to open.
Yeah, it was just shitty timing, and they couldn't have done anything about it. You know what I mean? And I think Concord would have been a really cool bar because like when you like look at the first pictures of even like you can like look up like kind of what Concord was, and it's very sexy. It's like a very sexy place, but it would only be a cocktail bar. It would never be anything more than that. Like maybe some food here and there, but like it wasn't really like a place that was conducive to like a restaurant.
I've been on that street a lot. I have no awareness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a weird coffee shop. Like the last 2-3 years, it was like just like a weird coffee shop. Okay. And then like it was like this speakeasy in the back that like kind of failed after 6 months. But it was taken over by Black Light, which they kind of just like, I don't know what their deal was, but they didn't put any love into it. I think they just kind of took the space for what it was. They didn't like put any money into renovating or anything like that. Maybe they painted stuff. It looked like there was some cheap paint kind of like over the top of everything. And maybe like a sound system that was like a little bit better, but it was like not like it was like a very like portable sound system, let's say. Like it was like, a speaker here, a speaker there, and they were able to rip it out pretty easily. We talked to a designer, told him what our ideas were. He completely went a different direction, and we saw the design, and I was like, okay, like that is sick. Like that is like such a
So what it is now is not what you originally were imagining?
There's some bits and pieces.
Yeah. I think the design is great. That's why.
I mean, there are some bits and pieces,
Yeah.
but like the designer is Paradigm, and they took what I said with the smallest grain of salt and turned it into like a very sexy Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, that's
it. Like it was like, okay. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, I was wrong. You're right. Like,
no, I think they nailed it. I think it fits the street so well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, from there we kind of like, once we had the design, we like paid off the designer, we started the business, and like we kind of put it all together.
So how long has it been open now?
We're about 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I would say like from when I officially kind of like opened to like putting actually like a little bit of like social media into it is about 3-4 weeks. The first couple of weeks was like just kind of like sending to my friends, hey, come hang out here. Like the first time you came there were still like the stickers on the wall and like stuff remember. Like that. Like, yeah, you wouldn't have noticed it, but like it was something that was like really bothering me. Like the construction team, like it was supposed to have all these red accent lighting, right? And the first time you were there, like it was like white LED lights with like these like cheap shit plastic red film over everything.
Okay.
And it was horrible. And it was like, like it was like missing like 2 or 3 centimeters like in the middle of the light was just like exposed white. And it was like they had just messed it up so badly. Like they had missed the mark on so many different things. And like, it was until like maybe like 2 or 3 weeks after they like kind of handed over the space where I was just like, listen guys, like I can't take this anymore. Like you need to fix it. And they came in, they like fixed everything up. Like took it to like, let's say like it was at like 85%. They took it to like 95%. Now we're at like probably 92% of like what it actually could be or what it is. Like there's still a lot of little details that like you wouldn't notice it, but I live there and I notice it every day. And I'm like, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed. Because it's like, just like those little details that I think that as a restaurateur and you put your reputation into something, you want to make sure that every detail is hit, because like then it's just like an excuse of like why it's not working. You know what I mean? And you don't want to have any excuses for yourself that's like it's not working because the LED film. You know what I mean? Like that's a bullshit excuse for why your restaurant's not working, but it is a reason that you're not sleeping at night.
Is there anything since opening that you just weren't expecting? Like that was a lot harder, or that something that came up?
I'm a chef, right? So like, I did not expect to be in the bar so much. I thought that I'd be more involved in the kitchen and like the menu and stuff like that. All the menus are kind of designed by me, and I just find myself gravitating to the bar because I just feel like that's where the vibe is missing, and I want to make sure that there's something like somebody there to like kind of like talk about what we're doing and what we are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially at the beginning of a restaurant, because it creates some kind of personal connection to it. Like when I came in the first time, we talked a little bit about whatever. You told me from New York, told me a little bit about how you make the tortillas in the back, and I think that's really important. Like it sounds stupid, but it's
like why we do it.
Yeah. How did you come up with the menu? How did you decide what's on the menu?
The menu is still working. Food menu and drink menu are very different. There are two kind of things that I think about with the menu. It's like, what is Mexican cuisine and what is something that people on Soi 11 want, that might entice them to come. Along with the fact that like there is a strong Indian culture, there's a strong Western culture in the street that maybe they don't understand Mexican cuisine, but like how do I tie it into like things that they do like? Because if I went 100% authentic Mexican, I just feel like like everyone's a critic, right? And everybody's like, I had a conversation with somebody in the restaurant today that was like, that you could have more Mexican stuff like burritos and fajitas, and I'm like, well, that's not really Mexican, that's Tex-Mex. And I mean, like, yeah, burritos are Mexican, but like it's like not what represents. I mean, that it's what represents Mexican internationally, But like in Mexico, like people are not just like sitting on the street eating fajitas. You know what I mean? It's like very Tex-Mex. So when I generated the menu, is like I knew that I'm gonna have a couple people like that. So there's like a couple things in the menu that are like kind of to shut people up like that.
Oh, like what?
Like the enchiladas and like you know, the fajita. Like I'm gonna do an elevated fajita in like the next menu, like maybe like 2-3 months down the line. That's like a very sexy steak fajita, but it's like meant for the table for sharing. It comes out on a sizzling platter with like all the accoutrements, rather than doing what my original idea was, which was like a braised short rib birria, which would come to the table like as a short rib. I just think that because if I put it on a sizzling platter, and people would be like, "Oh, that's Mexican," you know. And I was like, "Well, it's like that really typical American Mexican." Yeah, so I wanted to, when I generate the menu, I kind of have to put these things into my mind where it's like, you know, you are getting a tourist. You are getting, and I would say like of that tourist crowd, it's going to be 50% is like Middle East or
Really?
yeah, like I can't really say Middle East like for Indians, but like, you know, you might say like Bangladesh or India or
Yeah, but you're saying not European, not American, which I assume would be the
not 50%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think most of what you get like walking in and around Soy 11 is not what you would think as like a normal like farang or like a Western or like let's say like a European or Russian or American.
Yeah.
I think most of it is actually.
So when people walk in, have you had like some, because it's, again, yeah, I get what you're saying, especially in that area, it's such an international crowd. Everybody can interpret the same thing differently.
Yeah.
So
I had someone be like, ceviche is not Mexican. And I'm like, yeah, of course. It's like, yeah. I mean, they have ceviche and they also have ceviche in Peru. You know, like they also have ceviche and like empanadas in Argentina.
I think some people take themselves too seriously.
They like, yeah, like, and it becomes like, you know, it's like, yeah, well, I'm doing a masa empanada. I want to eventually do a pupusa. It's like, yeah, pupusa is like from Salvador, but like, if I can do a masa bait, a lot of the things that I want to do in Molino is like more work on the masa, you know, because of the name and like how it matches like kind of the cuisine of like, you know, like South America, Central America, where it's like the masa is kind of like the staple of like the food. And that's why I chose the name Molino. It's not necessarily like a Mexican name. It's like very like conducive to like the Molino in South America or in Central America is the machine where they make the masa, right? So it doesn't put me into like just the stigma of like Mexican restaurant. Like I like to say Mexican restaurant because I think if I said like Latin American restaurant, people would be like, huh, what's that? But if you say Mexican, it kind of like puts a concept into people's heads. I have tacos, right? So tacos, Mexican restaurant. Okay. That kind of like itch is scratched for people. And I put guacamole on the menu. It's like, that's like typical international Mexican staples. And those are there. And then using kind of like ingredients like guajillo and achote and putting things on the menu like moles and stuff like that, where those are very like authentic Mexican things. So it like really hits the Mexican mark. But then having things that like if an Indian tourist walks into the restaurant or like a Middle Eastern tourist walks into the restaurant and they're like, what can I eat that's vegetarian, or what can I eat that's, you know, that I'm going to understand? It's like, you want chicken wings? You know, like they're like a Mexican version of chicken wings, but like it's like just chicken wings like with tahini and cilantro mayo, and it's like it's very easy for them to understand what it is, and it's very easy for my staff to sell them. Like, you want chicken wings? Yeah, okay, you know.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I don't know. It's like,
so let's say someone's coming to the restaurant for the first time. Can you recommend a starter, an entree, and a drink?
I would say if someone comes to the restaurant for the first time, they should get 4 things, right? They should get the queso fonduta, with chorizo inside. They should get, and they can get that or the guacamole. They should get 2 tacos, and they should choose whatever taco flavors that they want. And then I'd like them to try a main course, which is something a little bit different that kind of fills them up, which, I would always kind of recommend either our pork chop because it's got a mole, which is very authentic to Mexico. And it's got chicharrones on it, and it's kind of light and refreshing if you're on a date. Or I would say if they're vegetarian, go with the roasted or smoked eggplant. Every single person who eats eggplant is wow, it's this is really yummy. It's kind of like an elevated eggplant parmesan, but to the whole next level. And I'm yeah, exactly. It's it's definitely not Mexican. It has Mexican ingredients. It has pickled jalapeno and all these different things that are kind of Mexican and but it's very it's a very satisfying dish in terms of it's rich, it's light, it's got every flavor profile. It's a bit bitter, but it's a bit sweet. When you smoke the eggplant, it becomes a bit sweet, and then you have the spice that comes from the chipotle, and it just I feel ties into what we kind of do, where it's kind of a mix of a bunch of different cultures, where the flavor is very Mexican, but the feeling is very elegant when you eat it.
Oh, I when I went in for the first time, I had the tacos. I love the tacos there.
Okay.
Hands down, best tacos I've had in Bangkok. So
fuck yeah.
I know I'm not the most sophisticated palate in the world, but I can say that at least.
That's amazing.
Guys, if you want to see what some of the food looks like, what the restaurant looks like, check out Molino on Instagram. I'm going to put a link down below. Thank you, Lenny, for coming by and telling the story. Fun. I just wandered in a few weeks ago. I thought it was a really cool place, so I figured let's hear how this all came to be. And guys, if you want to see more of what's happening in Bangkok, hit the subscribe button, check out the Facebook group below, and we will see you in the next one.